The topic tonight is building products for the Fortune 500. And there's a lot to dig into there. Building products, co-founding, choosing a co-founder, securing enterprise clients. When you see rapid growth, how do you manage that rapid growth? Whenever you're managing a team, how do you go from an individual technical practitioner to someone who's managing people? How do you grow a company from 2 different offices? It's all that and more, and we're really fortunate that we have Isaac Oslund. He's the co-founder and CTO of Bananatag. They've grown a company to over 100 people from 2 offices, Vancouver and Kelowna. Fun fact, Isaac first got into programming because he was trying to steal information. Hopefully we get into that later on. He's obsessed with hobbies. He's currently working on woodworking. Before he was 20, he had already co-founded a company and crashed it into the ground. So hopefully we get into that too. So without further ado, let's welcome Isaac.
Yeah, thank you.
Mic's working?
Oh, yeah, it's working fine. Thank you so much. This is, I'm really surprised I haven't been here before. This is an amazing event. And
We don't know yet.
yeah, no, I mean, the event generally. Super honored to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a really good community. Thank you for taking the time out of your week to speak here. You're based in Vancouver, right?
I am, yeah.
Even though half the team's in Kelowna?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So just to get into it, the 2 things here. So tell us what Bananatag is, but also tell us, go back in history and maybe in 3 to 5 points, tell us about, what was your first job? What was your first tech job? What are a few milestones that's got you from when you first started working to where you are today?
Okay, yeah, so I don't think I have like a super exciting career, so yeah, surprise or spoiler. It's not like a linear narrative. I think the underlining part of my career, the consistent part of my career, is that it's always been about software and software development. That's been a passion of mine since I was a kid. I got into it in my early teens, and by the time I was second year in university, I think that's mostly what I was doing for a living, a little web dev shop. And kind of saw the opportunity there. There was a lot of, I guess, kind of early on spawned a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, yeah. So by the time I finished university, I'd built out a pretty good portfolio, building applications, web applications and websites, kind of start to finish. I really liked software. I also liked design, and I wasn't really sure which way I wanted to go there. And I took my first job as a lead designer, and found myself back in software only like within 6 months of working there. I was kind of taking on some of the software projects that were coming up in the department, and that was at Big White Ski Resort, which is one of the big employers in Kelowna, and after that, I moved to Vancouver. I took a position with Steve Nash Fitness, working internally, building projects internally, so that's the intranets and kind of personal training, scheduling, and all these kinds of things. I think they were all like fairly, they're things that I could kind of immediately see impact, and it wasn't a big enough organization that I kind of got an idea of how enterprise systems work, tying into things like Active Directory and building on applications like that. And it was there actually that I kind of got my head around the subscription model, which is what we do here. It wasn't SaaS, but selling gym memberships, and you get familiar with some of the things like MRR and CAC, like the cost of acquisition and all these kinds of things. And it was while I was working there that Bananatag came up, and it came up as a side project. I'd always worked on side projects since I was younger. Came up as a side project with a very close friend of mine who reached out to me. He was heading up a sales team at the time, and was like, hey, do you think we could, or could you help me maybe solve this problem? And the problem he was having was he was sending out emails, the team was sending out emails, and they had no idea if people were interacting with those emails. And so we built a little project over a weekend, and that was the beginning of Bananatag.
Great. And so if you go back to when you were doing your own sort of software development company, What were some of the web applications? Was it like really basic stuff compared to like obviously what we're doing now with the internet?
Yeah, it was I guess it was a mix. I think if it was anything complicated, it would have been around scraping information for people for directories and things like that. But a lot of it was pretty basic. Yeah, you're building things like Facebook applications and similar, basically CRUD apps. Create, read, update, delete, simple store stuff in the database and pull it out. But a lot of fooling around, a lot of experience kind of in different ecosystems, from like C# to Java and JavaScript. But yeah.
So you mentioned that one of your co-founders for Bananatag reached out to you. He was working with the sales team, and they weren't sure people could read their emails, or they weren't sure what was happening with them. So take us farther. So what were they trying to do, and then what was the solution?
So the solution, like I think any first solution, it's a very basic solution. The solution he had actually pitched was, can I track links on my outbound emails? I just want to know if people are interacting with emails. And I had actually worked on like the portal for the sales team and that company. And so we just expanded it a bit. So outbound emails had tracked links. So it's basically Bitly, and it worked. A few months later, he reached out to me and said, this is really working. Do you think we could put this in Outlook or in Gmail? And that conversation led to the beginning of Bananatag.
Mm-hmm. And so you were in Vancouver, but this co-founder wasn't, correct? Or was he?
Yes, I was in Vancouver. Corey Wagner, he was in Kelowna, and so we started in Kelowna and Vancouver at the same time. We didn't have an intention of really making this into a big company, and I had a bunch of other ideas that I thought were way better. This was just going to be a quick side project, and I remember Corey saying, "Hey, we're going to make like maybe we can make like $5,000 and pay rent between the two of us," and that was the ambition.
Mm-hmm. And so that was the ambition. Very humble. Maybe very quickly tell us like what's the scale of Bananatag today? So I mentioned two offices, 100 employees. Can you give us any other sense of the scale of the company? Just how far you've grown? Don't have to go into many details.
Those are great metrics. We have two.
Maybe I used the best one.
So it's two offices, 100 people and growing. We've had a lot of growth over the last 4 years, ever since we really got into the enterprise space, and still a lot of growth to come. It's really interesting to see everything kind of mature over time. And I think we're going to talk about it tonight, but like how the role changes, how my role changes. But I think anybody in a high growth company, which I'm sure a lot of people here are a part of, how your role changes all the time. Other metrics, we work with really cool companies, like a lot of Fortune 500 companies. I don't remember a lot of the brands. I work on the technical side. I honestly don't keep track of the companies that we have. I see the logos just like anyone else who's going to our external website. It's there's McDonald's, there's General Electric, there's American Airlines, GE.
That's big customers.
Yeah, a lot of big customers. And again, like we weren't in an enterprise. We weren't ready for enterprise when enterprise came to us. We were too small for these companies, and somehow it worked.
So let's talk about that then, right? So someone reaches out to you, says, can you help us with this problem? You develop a product together. You get a few, I guess, smaller customers probably to begin with. And now you're working with, again, multiple Fortune 500 companies. What is the difference between what you did in the early days, assuming you were the one actually coding stuff, versus what you do today?
So the responsibilities, my role or the roles I play and my responsibilities they're changing all the time. They're always in flux. I don't think I've ever felt comfortable in my role ever. Since I started. I'm here talking to everyone tonight, not because this is a comfortable thing for me to do, but it's part of my growth. Like the company requires me to grow, and if I'm not willing to grow, I don't come along for the ride. It sounds weird, but I think it's true. But yeah, first at the very beginning, I was really working on I was an individual contributor across many different I guess wearing different hats. Like I was the senior software developer. I was the product owner, the designer. I worked on the marketing site. I built the marketing site. I was writing blog posts, I was doing customer support. You're doing a lot of things, and that changed all the time. Like, I don't think quarter to quarter it was always changing. I remember Corey and Chris, those are the two other co-founders, who are brothers and really close friends of mine, coming to me one time within like the first 6 months of launching, and saying, Isaac, you got to stop doing the customer support now. Like, take your time. You're the only developer. Let's just focus on the development of the products and the design and things like that. So it was one responsibility that disappeared, and I think it's kind of always happening like that. You're taking a responsibility and dropping another one, taking two, dropping one, taking five, dropping one. I don't drop them fast enough. But nowadays my role has changed. It's a lot different than what it was at the very beginning. I'm more. I think I have a lot more time working with leadership on strategy of the company. I do a lot of my time disseminating that strategy and talking about it with the company and people inside of the company, working across departments. But I do a lot still on the engineering side, and a lot of people management. Probably too much people management for my role. We're looking for an engineering manager, I have just very recently we hired a director of product, which is amazing. It's Partho Ghosh somewhere here, who joined the team. That was awesome because product used to roll up to me as well, and that's a responsibility I don't have to manage anymore, and that's awesome. I think the exciting part about this role is. About like kind of being a founder and employee in a company is getting to wear these different hats, getting the opportunity to wear these different hats, and kind of stretching yourself, and then also getting that next, almost like a little bit of a raise. Like, I'm developing my career as I go along with people, and they're also developing their careers.
So as a CTO, I'm an arts graduate, but I was just reading actually that arts graduates are now the hip thing, but. How do you measure your success as a CTO?
It's again, I'm gonna have to go back to the beginning where, like, I think it hasn't, it's changed over time. For a long time, it really was. I mean, there's some really obvious measurements of success in the company. You have your revenue, maybe MRR. You have churn and the retention stuff. But you have hitting company objectives. But for me, a lot of the stuff, what I would measure as success are the things that like get me excited. Like when I leave work and go, I made an impact. I did something. Or when I'm going into work, going, I know I'm gonna make a difference today. And that's changed. It used to really be when I first started, and for a while, probably too long, it was about, am I solving a technical problem? Maybe a high technical barrier to entry. Maybe our competitors can't do that. It really was satisfying for me to be able to jump in and like solve a problem that was hard. As the customer using the product that I developed. And that's changed. That's really changed to the point that I don't really identify with that anymore. That was like a daily coder kind of mentality, an individual contributor mentality. And I did that for a long time, and arguably for too long, where I worked with the team as a daily coder. Now it's quite different. I really do. I feel successful when I see the team succeeding, when we're hitting objectives as a team. When I see someone that has a lot of potential and I'm part of unlocking that potential, that's success for me. It really, it kind of happened all kind of overnight for me on that. It was late 2017. I can remember when, almost around the same time, December, I was doing a little POC, a little proof of concept on something that I thought was really cool that maybe we could dig into in Q2 2018 or whatever. And I'd spent like 8 hours or 10 hours that week, and I realized like coding, and I forewent a few like one-on-ones and some things like that, and it wasn't like there was a lot of follow, but I do remember reflecting on it and going, I'm doing too much coding. I have a whole team of people to manage. At that point, it wasn't a big team, but it was too many people for me to be taking the time to do that, and I was thinking, am I going to be happy as a leader in an organization? Like, am I going to be able to be satisfied waking up every day and not coding, the only thing that really was getting me excited? solving these problems. Maybe I'm admitting too much here, but no, I was going like, am I going to be happy there? And I started reading and researching and talking to people, but just shortly after that, I started really feeling excited about unlocking other people's potential and being a force multiplier, being a part of facilitating success and not being the person individually contributing like that.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So I'm a communications director, started out as a specialist, and there are days where I feel like I don't do anything because I don't do any of the work that I used to do.
Yeah.
You have to relinquish responsibilities. I totally get that. Can you talk about some of the, maybe 3 different areas? So I think in the last 4 years, you guys have pretty much tripled your customer base, tripled your employee base, right? There had to have been some growing pains. Can you talk about those? And again, I can, maybe from a product perspective, team building, and then a personal growth perspective. So there's really 3 questions there, right?
Yeah.
Product, team, personal growth, growing pains with, again, this rapid growth that you guys have had. And I'll remind you if you don't answer everything.
Yeah, okay, so I'll try to segment those a bit.
Yeah.
The product growth, I think that's the most straightforward one. When we launched, like this is 2011 when we started and started coding, I was building products. It was at Steve Nash, but there were some other elements there, but it was like really coming from a more enterprise perspective. We launched our product, we got bare metal servers. I think we rented rack space. So we didn't go cloud because it was like, cloud's not a trustworthy enterprise solution. We weren't thinking enterprise, but we're also like, it was just a bit of a mentality there. And that was one of the first tricks in scaling the product, getting out of there. And we got out of there pretty early, thank God. But being on Amazon has really helped out. I think there's a few AWS, yes. There's a few considerations here with product and pains there. I think there's the security side, which is really important as you scale. There's scaling the product, like the architecture and the application code. Can a lot of people work on that? Do you have the underpinning architecture that can scale, or auto-scaling infrastructure for when you get hit or when you bring a big client on? And then there's the whole data side. What types of data are you storing? Where are you storing that data? How are you storing that data? All those things are really important. And we didn't answer those all at once. Like our product, when we first started, our product it didn't store any PII, so there's no personally identifiable information. And that was a really lucky thing for us. We had a few really lucky parts of our product that ended up kind of allowing us to pass these security documents that you get when you join an enterprise, when you get brought on as the enterprise service, and I think now where our product is, we just wouldn't be able, if you jumped back in time with what we had available for our security and just how we stored data and some of those things, we wouldn't have passed at that point. But those are things like you kind of one client at a time. How do we address these problems? How do we address these problems? And that's been tricky, but I think that's, again, of the scaling problems, technology is the easiest one for me.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so you've got like IKEA, American Airlines, McDonald's. Those are massive clients, right? So let's say InnovAPC takes on Bananatag, it's like 25 emails, right, or 25 employees. So this is pretty large scale, right? So did they just break your infrastructure at all or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, actually, when we first started, I don't think I mentioned this, but yeah, when we first started, that's actually how we found this market. We found this market when we had these crazy alarms going off, and we have like a system that processing recipient events opens. So we suddenly started having like tens of thousands of opens happen in a single minute period, and we were panicking. We were like, oh my God, what's happening? And that was one of those at large enterprises hitting your systems. And at that point, we weren't built to handle that. We had a different trajectory. We had a high, medium, and low case, and we had enough server power, enough compute power, enough database power to handle what we thought we would need to handle in the worst case scenario, and we had something that happened way worse than our worst case because of these enterprise customers. And that kicked up our first conversation with, I think it was General Electric, and we were like, hey, service abuse, get off our system.
What do you mean by that?
So they hit our system, and it was like overwhelming to us. We had this product that was a one-to-one email tracking service built into Gmail, built into Outlook. Every email you send, we're tracking, and it's very predictable. You know, you get 200 signups a day, and we were trying to grow that number, but we could predict how many events our systems had to handle, and when General Electric came and started using or misusing our system, we were like, oh, this is the wrong use case, and we sent them like a letter saying like service abuse. Please use MailChimp in constant contact, and that's where the conversation started. Like we were like, gotta go to a one-to-many provider, and we weren't happy about it. It didn't seem interesting to us at all, and I was like a number of other companies that came to us from that point, and then we were like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe we should talk to them a little bit and maybe charge them some more money.
Yeah, for sure. So from a team perspective,
okay, yeah,
the
right.
team is it might be a bit linked to like personal growth, right?
I'll get one. Oh yeah.
So maybe link the two, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, you're over 100 people now.
Yeah.
Or approximately, right? And you're in 2 offices.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us about the setup of your offices. Like, is it sales and then engineering or whatever? And then talk about just growing pains.
Yeah. So so our offices are in Vancouver here. We're marketing and engineering product. It's product development and marketing, and then in Kelowna it's sales, customer success, support, and it's really worked for us that way, and I can talk about that a little later. On the growing pains for team, I think everyone's going to know it. Talent, man, that is a tricky thing here in Vancouver, but I think generally everywhere in a broad category. And the other one is frameworks and methodologies, the things you use to scale a team, to have a team work together. So I think those are the kind of 2 categories that are painful when you're growing a team. On the talent side, we're bootstrapped. We don't have a lot of resources. We couldn't compete with salaries with anyone. We literally, as we grew, we got enough money to pay for an engineer. We're like, let's hire an engineer. We could never really outstrip our revenue. So our spending always was in check. We knew we couldn't. It's a tricky problem, right? You want to bring the best people. You want to have a world-class software company, but you want world-class people to join your organization. You want to keep going, but you can't attract those people. You have Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. They'll fly you down to Silicon Valley and take you in a limo and give you an Xbox, and it's not even. We can't be competitive in that space, and so Corey, Chris, and I think one of the things we did really well is we really, again, we're playing parts that are bigger than us too, and we're here to kind of stretch ourselves, and we decided we want to invest in people that want to grow themselves before technical knowledge, before technical expertise, and so that's really what we did. So we had a 2 interview process, which we still do today, and sometimes more, but it was focused on the technical side and then focused on kind of this value alignment side. And the value that we really looked for with people was growth. Like, are you curious? Do you want to push yourself? We looked for things like ownership and accountability, and those things we actually weighed way more than technical expertise. And that's because we really believed, and I think we made the right bet, that we could get people to the level that people were willing to get there, and we could push people, and we made a commitment really to invest into people. And since we started, we've been investing around 5% of people's annual salaries, I guess, into professional growth or development, and And I think that has really helped us close that gap because we have an amazing team, and some of the people are homegrown. And the thing is, I guess when you're growing people like that, the disadvantage and maybe a compliment to that is that other people see that, like Amazon, and they come in and go, "Yo, what up?" And they take some of your best people, but that's just how it goes. Over time, it actually has been it's been amazing, and I think throughout the company we really have that philosophy of kind of investing in and growing individually. We think a successful company is made up by successful individuals in the company. So we really push for that kind of individualistic perspective. So that's the one part. I told you before I go on tangents, so you got to keep me in check.
We're all loving it.
Okay, so I realized I didn't have the microphone close enough. Okay.
Yeah, I just noticed that now too.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was one perspective, which is the talent, and then the other part that I found incredibly tricky is how much what types of methodologies do you want to adopt at what stages of the company? When you're like two people or one person, do you want to be doing Scrum ceremonies? When you're four people, what ceremonies do you want to do? What things do you want to do? You want to be agile, but you're really naturally agile at the very beginning. There's a competitive advantage with being small, and I always wrestled with how much process we want to inject into the team. At what stage. And then as soon as you have something that's working really well, you outgrow it. And people start going, oh, what we had like 6 months ago was so great. And like, why are we trying this other thing now? And it's like, we have 5 more people or 8 more people and it's not working. Like what we're doing isn't working. So trying to find like what you think is going to fit and work with the team and, really promote like accountability and visibility across the department and some of that stuff. It's been really tricky. My savior in that department is sitting over there. That's Pedro, who's our Scrum Master and really helped us get into shape over the last little while. Kind of Scrum Master, Agile coach for the company. But that's my team growth pains.
Solid. Now, obviously, this is where you have to be the most vulnerable.
Okay.
How have you grown?
It's been, I'd say early on, similar story. A lot of my growth at the beginning would have been continually learning. It's hard on the technical side. The hardest part of my growth has been on the people management side, which is I have worked in lead positions as a lead developer, helping, working on stuff. But as a leader and as a manager, that was not something that I was good at and not something that I was naturally good at. And it was very, very challenging. I think it's really important. I think you can do a lot of growing by yourself. Like you can do a lot of growing by reading, by being introspective. But it's essential. It's essential that you get feedback, and that you get feedback, honest feedback from the people you work with. And that means being vulnerable and open to criticism. People have told me point blank, I think you're a terrible boss. And that's like super hard to hear. But if you can't hear that, if you're not willing to like allow people to say that, you can't address that. Maybe there's things that you can address and the person will walk away feeling like, oh, I can't believe I made that judgment. Or maybe there's things that you should actually be doing differently. And for me, I think like I have this, I've had this like really strong belief in being transparent, and Corey and Chris as well. Like, let's be transparent, let's be honest and open, and take feedback and grow. And I think that as something you say versus something that you do they're two different things. It's very difficult, to grow a company, and you're wearing all sorts of hats. You're really busy. How are you inviting criticism? How are you being vulnerable and open? That was a challenge. It was really difficult to get to that point. I think I've gotten better at it. I've had people since then, actually, since like when I went on a war path trying to fix this problem, tell me, Isaac, I think you're too vulnerable. So yeah. Anyway, I've really tried to open that up because the biggest points of my growth for myself have been in that. I've kind of talked about like the fact that you're always changing your responsibilities, and trying to grow with the organization. You wear really like two hats as a founder. I think you wear a hat as a founder investor, but you also wear a hat as an employee. And as an investor, I want me to be the best employee. And if I'm not a good employee, I shouldn't be there. So if I'm not willing to grow as much as the rest of the people in the team, if I'm not the person that's supposed to be there, I shouldn't be there. Because again, as an investor, I'm greedy and I want this to be successful. There's that element there. And as an employee, I want to be successful in my career. I want to be professionally successful. I want to keep pushing myself forward. It's some of those things. Like people would tell me, I remember kind of hearing the criticism going like, hey, Isaac, you're not letting us fail. And I thought I was doing a great job letting people fail, giving people responsibilities, and then you find out that people don't think you're giving up responsibilities properly, that I was being prescriptive, that I jump in and when people ask me, like, how do you think I should do this? I'm not questioning. I'm not going like, how do you think you should do it? Like, what's your first approach? Instead, I'm going, do this and then this and then this and then this. And I'm taking away any ownership from people. So that's difficult, and you can learn that academically, but like over time that actually you have to learn how to do it naturally, like not answering how to do something. I try to be very accountable on that. Like I sometimes run things by some other people on the team. I'm like, hey guys, like Pedro, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to disempower people. I don't want a solution. I don't want to do that. And so I try to be really mindful. I think as you scale, it's really important to have people that are empowered on the team. And for me, for a long time, ignorantly, I was disempowering, and I was taking away people's responsibility by being very prescriptive.
Totally. So someone actually said to you, I think you're a terrible boss.
Yeah.
That happens.
So the saving grace on the terrible boss comment was that they said, you're really technical, like you're awesome technical contributor, but you're a really bad boss. And I was like, I think they said really bad manager, which I don't know if it's better, but at the same time, I was like, oh, that's fair. Because like I think not everybody gets equal treatment as managers. Some people are harder to manage than others, and so some people might have thought, oh, Isaac's a great manager, but that's just someone that I works with a little bit better. But there were people, of course, that don't. And I think at this point now in my career, I spend a lot of my time doing one-on-ones. I spend a lot of time, meeting with people and talking with people and getting invested in their lives. And that was again a mental switch for me. Yeah.
I have more questions, but I want to make sure that I give people here some time. It's very bright, but there's a question right there. So here, I'll bring you the mic.
Well, I actually have a couple of questions. So the first one is, why didn't you guys take money, or were you looking for money at all? In terms of venture capital, you said that you guys were bootstrapped, and what were the reasons for you not to look for money or not to take any money? And then the second question I had was related to the customer success team. Did you see any correlation between having a customer success team and your churn rate, and what is your churn rate today?
Okay, so I'll answer the first question first. No, we were really intentional about not taking any venture or institutional capital, and it's not because we're like zealots against it. We don't have a strong opinion on it. We are open to it, but we have basically iteratively evaluated that option, and we were really fortunate. When we launched, we got covered by Mashable within a short period of time, and we had 10,000 customers in 2 weeks, or 10,000 users in 2 weeks. Within 6 months, we had 50 or 60,000 users, and we were cash positive right away. Not everybody is that fortunate, and it put us in a situation where when we thought about raising, it was you're considering, what am I going to do with that money? No investor is going to give you money and let you sit on it, right? You have to have a plan to spend it. You got to spend it. It's if you're going to sit on it, they might as well leave it in the bank and collect interest. So we've continually looked at that and been like, well, we have the money to fund what we're doing. We've been pure growth. We don't have any profit. I say cash positive. We're not profitable. When we sell a year contract, we're spending that money immediately. Not exactly, but like we're not profiting. We're constantly investing into the company, and I think every so often we take a look at that and we say, what would we do? What are the opportunities? Would this help propel our growth? And the answer so far has been no. We wouldn't know what to do with $15 or $20 million. And then for the second question around churn, yes, customer success, we introduced it 3.5 years ago or something like that. Dramatically impactful, really impactful on retention, really important on the enterprise side. Our churn rate is good, but we think it can be much better. But it's pretty good. I'm not going to say the number.
He's not allowed. Question right here.
Hi, my name is Karen. I manage privacy and security for X Matters, so I have kind of the same clients you have. I deal with McDonald's, GE, so they have high requirements in terms of privacy and security, and it's not enough for these clients relying, for example, on AWS certifications, in our case, Google Cloud, and just saying, okay, we comply with GDPR. Now we have CCPA coming into force in January. So what do you do in terms of data governance, and what is in the pipeline to provide assurance in terms of information security?
Yeah, wow, that's a good one, a good question. We have been very fortunate from when we started out, and one of the reasons we were able to sell to enterprise right away is like I mentioned earlier, the type of data we stored. And we could make an argument early on, and not where the product is now, but we could make an argument early on that the type of data that was stored was metadata, and we could store it like pseudo-anonymously, and we could prove that. We go through those large security questionnaires. We don't right now have a major compliancy. We're in the middle of a SOC. That's one of the things we're working on. But other than that, yeah, we actually have external auditors come in, including Google and things like that, come in and do certify us. A lot of these organizations actually have auditors. People will fly down to our offices and do an audit on site. I don't know if that covers some of those things, but we're doing a bunch of different things trying to close some gaps there. But we are.
Great, good question. A couple over here.
Yeah.
First of all, I met a number of your team at the TechVancouver event. They seem like a good, fun group. I wanted to ask you about when, like, in the early stages of your company, how did you sort of get the attention of large companies like GE and whatnot, being a small operation?
Yeah. I think part of this is going to come down to a little bit of luck. We had a bit of a virality with the original part of our product. When we got covered by Lifehacker and Mashable, a couple of big publications early, it spun off like a ton of smaller sites copying that content. I remember it was getting translated into like Farsi and across the world there was like blog articles and translations of the product, and that happened for a while for us with the things that we're building and releasing, and I think at a point we actually just got a speaker because we were kind of we had at that point maybe 150,000 users, and this is a freemium product, so that's not paid users, but not all paid users. But we had a whole bunch of people using it, and a speaker at a conference mentioned us at this internal comms conference, and that's what kind of got us. Unfortunately, we didn't have like really cool strategy around that. We just got lucky.
Hey, my name's John. We're in sort of soft launch on a B2C fintech platform called Whatify. And we're starting to get a bit of feedback on enterprise instead. And we're considering going enterprise as our funding model as opposed to pursuing funding. Any thoughts on dangers and pitfalls as making that our plan for scale as opposed to traditional funding?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I'd have to know a little bit more about the organization and like what your guys' plans are there. But I mean, enterprise, you definitely want to have a really robust sales team in place, right? Because the sales cycle is long. And fintech, I'm sure your sales cycle is even going to be longer than ours. So you'd have to build that in. It'll be a lot longer, you know, getting the customers, and the deal size, I guess, would also be another big consideration. We ramped up slowly before we hit that enterprise, and we had a bunch of things in place. I think you could do it. I think you could do it. Definitely, absolutely, you could do it. But you'd have to factor in a bunch of things that I don't really know. But we could chat afterwards.
Great. If there are no any more questions at this point, I will perhaps end it with the final question. Can you give us either an article or a blog post or a book or a person who's had just a tremendous impact on, you know, how you think about your work, your career, or any ideas or the world, that sort of thing?
So I'll spit out a couple of things here. Yeah, I do read a lot of articles and blog posts. You watch YouTube videos on tech stuff. I really love Joel Spolsky, Joel on Tech, or Joel on Software, the blog.
Joel on Software?
Joel on Software. That's Stack Overflow founder. But if I had one book, and I think a lot of people, this is not going to be a new book for anyone, but Radical Candor. But like for me, the technology stuff it's been something that I've been really interested in and learning. It hasn't been a challenge. But Radical Candor as a book for being a leader and being a manager has been really, really important. And then other things for me in that I find interesting. This is totally independent of work, but you know, it's stressful. It's not easy, I think, being a founder and CTO or any kind of role actually in a growing company. I don't think it's a lot of change, and I read a lot of books, kind of like human history books, like the Homo Deus and Homo Sapiens and books like that, or some of those ones. I like the perspective. There's Ray Dalio principles, and he has a principle that's basically you're everything and nothing at the same time, and I kind of always lean on that one, which is like just for perspective, like you're one person of billions of people in on a planet on like innumerable planets. You mean nothing. And nothing you do means anything because sun's gonna burn out, and so kind of free yourself a little bit. At the same time, you're also one person, and the scope you live in and the plane you live in is the only one you have and the only one we know you have, and so make the most of it. But put yourself in some perspective. Sometimes I kind of crutch on that as I spiral out trying to think of the next ways to solve problems. But yeah. Great way to end this, yeah.
Well, thank you, Isaac, for your time, for your openness and your honesty tonight, and for sharing those stories. Can we thank our guest?